Big morale booster. Hood realized that. Hood's from Kentucky. He's a tenacious fighter, much like Hooker on the Union side, and his troops love him. But Stonewall Jackson says to Hood, you can be relieved, you can take your troops back behind the Dunkard Church, make camp for the night. However, you must stand by in the morning. If I need you, you have to come immediately. And so the brigades of Jones and Lawton are up here, and they hit the initial assault from 1st Corps. But they are unable to hold back the troops of 1st Corps, and they began to give ground after a very bloody fight in the cornfield. And so Jackson realized his regiments were being reduced in strength, and they were about to be pushed back to the high ground in Dunkard Church. He realized he had to commit John Bell Hood's division. So he turned at about 7 a.m. He turned to Hood and he said, "You've got to come forward. You've got to reinforce Lawton and Jones." Hood's men are in the process of doing what?
Eating.
They hadn't even gotten there.
Setting up tents and cooking. And
getting ready to cook. They've got their cook fires set up. They're getting ready to cook their breakfast. And Hood says, "Not now, boys. Pack it up. We got to go back into the fight." They are very, very angry. And so at about this point, they come forward and they slam into the soldiers of the 1st Corps from the Union. Also about this time, something else significant happens on the Union side. Hooker is continuing to push his units forward, and he is up front on the battlefield, and Hooker gets shot in the foot.
That's right. Yep.
He doesn't realize at first that he's shot in the foot, but he starts feeling faint, and his boot begins to fill up with blood. And he realizes he's been shot, and he has to be taken off the field. He is taken back to the Pry House that I showed you earlier, where Letterman's at, and that's where he's treated. He recovers fully from his wound. But now you have 2 Corps commanders missing from the battlefield. What do you think happens?
Miscommunication.
The offensive stalls. The command and control begins to break down. So on this part of the battlefield, most of the early morning activity between 1st, 12th Corps, and Stonewall Jackson's men, it plays out. Very costly attack because of the loss of those 2 Corps commanders. The Union 2nd Corps is behind 12th Corps, actually to their left, and is coming this way. But as we'll talk about a little bit later, the 2nd Corps becomes separated, and only 1 division makes it to this part of the battlefield. The whole Corps is supposed to come this way towards the Dunkard Church, but only Sedgwick's division makes it there. They're the only ones that become involved. And Lee is forced to take 3 brigades that are down in the center of the battlefield that we'll go through and reinforce this area again. Most of that fighting takes place around the Dunkard Church in the West Woods. Very, very brutal fighting, but by 9:30, most of the fighting here is played out. Let me read you Hooker's battle report that he wrote several weeks after the battle. He said, "Every stalk of corn in the northern and the greater part of the field was cut as closely as it could have been with a knife, and the slain lay in rows precisely as they stood in their ranks a few moments before. It was never my fortune to witness a more bloody, dismal battlefield. There was no resisting this torrent of death-dealing mistiffs." That's what Hooker wrote. It was a very, very bloody affair. If you walk over here, we're not going to pull the maps out. You walk over here and take a look at this map, you kind of get an idea of a couple things. Again, here's 1st Corps pushing down from the Poffenberger farm through the cornfield. Mansfield and 12th Corps coming through on their left. I told you this road behind us is not here, but the cornfield ends at about this point. This is where most of the fighting took place. Sedgwick's division from 2nd Corps is going to come from this area of the battlefield and push through all the way toward the Dunkard Church. And in the West Woods, there's going to be some significant fighting. You can look at the casualties over here just on this end of the field. Look at the difference between how many engaged versus how many casualties there were per 1,000 soldiers for the Union versus the Confederates. It's very, very bloody. In fact, some of the regiments here, like the 1st Texas, will be completely decimated. They're no longer combat effective. They lost so many men. Okay, questions? We can go